A federal lawsuit has been filed on behalf of the South Carolina Shrimpers Association to put an end, as they say, to seafood fraud in the state. Today, I talk one-on-one with the attorney representing the association, Gedney M. Howe IV, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Gedney M. Howe IV, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. It's good to see you today.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, you are a third-generation lawyer with the law office of Gedney M. Howe. And of course, last week, your office proudly filed a federal lawsuit on behalf of the South Carolina Shrimpers Association, as you say, to put an end to the seafood fraud in our state. On your Instagram post, you said this quote, "For too long, some restaurants have been serving imported shrimp while falsely claiming it's local, deceiving customers and undercutting the honest work of our local shrimpers." You also went on to say this quote, "This isn't just about shrimp. It's about truth, transparency, and protecting a way of life that's fed South Carolinians for generations. We're taking this fight to court, and we won't stop until the truth is back on the menu," unquote. So tell me, Mr. Gedney, why this lawsuit? Why now?
So the triggering event really for this lawsuit was the testing that was done by Seed Consulting, that obviously the results went public, I think early last week. There was always kind of an undercurrent of thought that maybe there was some misrepresenting going on, but nobody had any evidence. And the results of that testing were just so dramatic that when the shrimpers and I got together to talk about what we were going to do, initially the feeling was, we're not sure what we're going to do, but we're going to do something. And as I began the process of exploring and researching the legal issue and to gain a better understanding of what our options were, it became pretty clear to me that our options were easy to figure out because it's just illegal. And the law provides a private cause of action under the Lanham Act and a private cause of action underneath South Carolina Code.
And Gedney, I know that you obviously spoke with the shrimpers before coming out publicly with this federal lawsuit. When did you all know as a law firm that these local restaurants weren't actually serving local seafood?
Really not until the test results came out. That was just such a watershed moment on this issue, and it put it under a spotlight and said unequivocally an unknown number to us right now, restaurants are actively committing fraud, and an additional number may or may not be engaging or cross the threshold of what the Federal Trade Commission calls a net impression, which is giving customers the impression that seafood is local, even if they don't say it explicitly.
Let me jump to that question. And according, the shrimpers are accusing more than 40 restaurants that you just mentioned of selling fraudulent shrimp, imported, mislabeled, and passed off as local catch, according to WCIB. Which shrimp do you all consider imported versus mislabeled?
So again, at this stage, just kind of shooting from the hip, an imported shrimp, we know that shrimp are brought in from countries like Guatemala. Ecuador is a tremendous producer. India, Thailand, China are all also very big producers. There are many, it's not uncommon to find Pacific shrimp here at restaurants in Charleston. Mislabeled is we're splitting hairs a little bit more. Under the South Carolina statute, which I believe is, oh Lord, I think it's 39.5-42, it specifically says that it is an unfair trade practice to say a product is from South Carolina if it is not. So under the statute, to advertise local seafood or advertise this as South Carolina seafood, even if it's from Georgia or North Carolina, is not permitted.
And I know that WCIB said on Friday morning that you and your team filed an action in the federal court in Charleston, asking a judge to issue an injunction forbidding local restaurants from advertising local seafood when they don't serve it. And this might be a silly question, Gedney, but in what ways have they advertised local seafood when it's not according to you all?
Again, I don't have the report from Seed Consulting quite yet. I do understand that Seed Consulting, they were looking for signs of advertising. And in their press release, they say that 25 restaurants explicitly advertise that they serve locally caught seafood and failed the test. So at least 25 of them are outright misrepresenting their product as being local.
Do we know, Gedney, which companies may purchase some local shrimp, but cater to amount of customers that they have may also supplement those with non-local shrimp?
That is a gray area that we are going to have to dig into a little bit further. That said, you've touched on what I've seen as one of the primary defenses from the restaurant industry, and that is, well, the shrimpers can't keep up with the demand. And I'll tell you that there are a number of very good local restaurants that are openly supportive, very supportive of the shrimping industry. The ones that were with us at the press conference, Miller's All Day was there, the Wreck of Richard and Charlene was there, and the chef and the GM from Nico were there. All of them year round serve local shrimp. So that it can be done. There's others locally that serve local shrimp year round. It can be done. This sentiment of, well, it's okay to lie about it because the shrimpers can't keep up with the demand. I mean, my response is right there, cooked into how I'm telling you. If the defense is, well, they can't keep up with the demand, that still doesn't mean you can lie about it. The law doesn't say you cannot misrepresent the origin of seafood except if locals can't keep up with the demand. It says you cannot do it, full stop. We're not casting a wide net on this thing. We're not on some fishing expedition. We're not trolling for facts. We're just hauling in the truth here.
And let me ask you this. I'm sure, if they were to advertise it as local, but let's say, for instance, once they run out, can they actually use that as backup?
The law says you cannot misrepresent the origin of the seafood. If you have local shrimp, you can say that you serve local shrimp. If you do not have local shrimp, you cannot say that you serve local shrimp. And I think a good example of that, I've been trying to come up with a good comparison. If you go into most of the oyster bars or places that serve oysters in Charleston, oftentimes there'll be a chalkboard and you look up there and they've got the brand name and then the city and the state that they came from. And it's on a chalkboard because they erase it and change it when they resource their oysters.
Is our local shrimp in Gedney going to be sustainable if all the restaurants in Charleston actually use local shrimp?
Sustainable in terms of meeting the demand, or sustainable in terms of protecting the shrimp population off the coast?
Oh, both. Yeah, you can talk about both.
So again, I think in terms of meeting the demand, it will be interesting to see that unfold. In the context of our lawsuit, that is really not a question before us, if you understand what I mean. I agree that it will be, again, interesting to see how that plays out. But when we look at the fact that the fleet has shrunk, Rocky Magwood tells me that when he was growing up, there were like 80 shrimp boats on Shem Creek, and now there's 7. The fleet has been adversely affected, and so that might affect their ability to supply the local restaurants. But my hope would certainly be that if we get this thing sorted out and the local shrimpers have a fighting chance again, the fleet will grow. That's just kind of open market economics. If we can't lie about where the shrimp are coming from and we've got to be honest, hopefully the fleet can grow again to meet that demand. And in terms of, I've seen some concerns about the health of the shrimp population off the coast of South Carolina. And, that is something that DNR monitors pretty closely. I don't know if you know this or if the general public knows this, but the shrimping season really, there are rough approximations of when it starts and stops, but it is ultimately decided by the Department of Natural Resources when to open and close shrimp season. And that is based off of the numbers that they're seeing be reported, their own firsthand test drags, and monitoring the population. They watch the population of shrimp and health of the population very closely, and they do a good job of it. And so I don't have any reason to believe they wouldn't continue to do a very good job protecting the health of the shrimp off our coast.
And I just have to ask you a simplistic question, Mr. Gedney.
Cool.
But what exactly is that demand right now for local shrimp?
The demand for local shrimp is difficult to put a figure on because of this misrepresentation. I know that there are, as we see from the test results, there are 40 restaurants that are not serving local shrimp. As the press release said, 25 of them are misrepresenting the origin of their shrimp. So that is at least, they only tested 44 of them, at least 25 restaurants are doing enough business and drawing enough people in under the guise of serving local shrimp and not doing it so we could fill at least 25 more restaurants. I know at the end of the season, the local shrimpers are having a problem where their own ice house will be full of shrimp and the dock can't necessarily accept more shrimp because they're having trouble moving what they've already caught. Presumably because their competition from these foreign mislabeled shrimp is so fierce.
Let me ask you this too, Mr. Gedney. Why can't you mentioned this a little bit earlier, I believe, but why can't restaurants actually use local shrimp from our very own shrimp fishermen?
Again, I think you can. We have, I know I don't want to hurt any feelings. I don't want to forget to name anybody. So I'll tell you that the shrimpers, if you go to SC Shrimp, if you go to the Shrimpers Association website, they are actively working to compile a comprehensive list of places that you can buy local shrimp from. They've verified. So everybody on that list is going to be a verified place that you can get local shrimp from. I know firsthand that places like Acme, Recca Richard and Charlene, Miller's, and Nico all have made a business model out of it. They do it all year. When the shrimp, before the shrimp go out of season, they buy in bulk to make sure they can continue to serve in the off season. It is a viable business model. People are doing it, and people are very successful doing it. So it can be done. But you've got these other restaurants that they want to advertise that they serve surf and turf with local shrimp, but they're not serving surf and turf. They're giving you a bait and switch.
And get me, how would your law firm identify and amend your complaint to get those accurate results that you are looking for?
Just yesterday afternoon, we issued a subpoena, which is a court document. We sent it to Seed Consulting, asking them they are barring any objection required to respond. And we're asking them to turn over to us their complete report and any notes and photos or additional documentation they may have in relation to the testing that they did. Once we get that, if, we're talking to you now, relying upon the press release they did, I imagine there will be 25 restaurants that are, an open and shut case of misrepresenting the origin and openly advertising them as local. The additional restaurants that are not necessarily outright advertising them as local, I'll have to sit down and spend a little bit of time comparing the documentation that I hopefully received from Seed Consulting and looking at the guidance given by the Federal Trade Commission and the NOAA and see if what these restaurants are doing rises to the level of, again, what is classified as a net impression, and if that's something that we believe is actionable. And at that time, we'll make our comprehensive list and amend our complaint to name the parties that we believe are guilty.
And this might be a relevant question, Mr. Gedney, but are you all just suing the restaurants? Are you including somebody else in the lawsuit as well?
So there's been some talk about, what the restaurants do and don't know, and maybe there's a supplier guilty of it. Again, at this time, our lawsuit is against the restaurants, and it is, again, for now, limited to the restaurants that Seed Consulting tested. My office, we don't like to bring a case until we have evidence. I like to have a pretty firm stand and don't want to get embarrassed in the courtroom. So we are for now sticking to the results that we're going to get from this subpoena and moving forward against those restaurants that are, we believe, actively violating state and federal law.
Yeah, and I'm probably going ahead of myself, and I don't even know if this is relevant, Mr. Gedney, but does this selling local shrimp only applies for restaurants, or does it go towards grocery stores as well?
It does go towards grocery stores as well. My understanding is that back in the 2000s, the Shrimpers Association and the restaurants, not the restaurants, the grocery stores had a similar issue. And it was resolved ultimately by the grocery stores taking down any advertisements they have, any misrepresentations in any photos or anything that might give a net impression, and just essentially the grocery stores agreed to do what we're looking for in this lawsuit. They agreed to resolve the issue and actively take steps to avoid misrepresenting the origin of their shrimp.
Very, very insightful information. Well, I hope to get you back on when you all get some more information results. So that'll be great to see you here. But for now, Gedney M. Howe the fourth. Thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Post House.
Thank you, Quintin. I appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome.